ever been in a situation where um, you're trying to talk about something that really makes you think,
Uh-huh.
and you just feel like you're speaking a completely different language? Or, maybe it feels like the more you understand something, the more alone you feel.
Yeah, that feeling.
Oh.
Intellectual isolation, right? Uh, it's something a lot of people who like digging deeper feel,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Right. So we're tackling this question kind of head on. Why does society sometimes seem to, well, shy away from or maybe even fear people who think really deeply?
It's a big question.
It is. And we've got some interesting stuff to look at. We're drawing from philosophy, particularly Arthur Schopenhauer.
Ah, Schopenhauer. Always
Yeah.
cheerful.
Huh, right. And also looking at historical patterns, there's this YouTube video, Yunala. It points to people like, Socrates, Newton, Galileo, Tesla.
Big names, all of whom face some serious pushback in their time.
Exactly. So the goal here for you listening is really to help make sense of these dynamics, if you've ever felt that kind of disconnect.
Yeah, we hope this exploration gives you some clarity, maybe helps you see those social reactions in a new light.
It's not about saying your deep thoughts are wrong or anything.
No, not at all. It's more about understanding the why behind how people sometimes react, the sort of underlying reasons for these social responses.
Okay, so that video we mentioned talked about something called the mirror effect. Can you break that down a bit? What's the core idea there?
Right, the mirror effect. The the basic idea is that just being around someone who thinks deeply, well, it can make other people feel subtly uncomfortable.
Even without saying anything.
Yeah, exactly. Even if the deep thinker isn't being critical at all. Their perspective, just by existing, can unconsciously kind of highlight differences in understanding or viewpoints.
Like an unspoken comparison.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And that can be unsettling for people. It might even, breed a bit of resentment if they're not comfortable with that contrast. People aren't always eager to see a different way of looking at things, especially if it um, challenges their own views.
That's interesting because, we might admire someone who's, say, physically strong, or maybe we envy someone with a lot of money.
Sure.
But the reaction to intellectual depth often feels different. Why do you think that is? Why the distinction?
Well, if you think about it, things like physical strength or wealth,
Mm-hmm.
they're often seen as more external. Achievements we can observe, maybe even aspire to, but they don't necessarily hit our core sense of self in the same way.
Okay.
But intelligence, that's much more tangled up with how we see ourselves, like our beliefs, how we understand reality. So when you meet someone operating on a, let's say, deeper intellectual level,
Mm.
especially if they question things you take for granted,
It feels more personal.
it can feel like a direct challenge, yeah.
Yeah.
Has on to your identity, your whole grasp on the world. It's not just an outside difference, it touches something really central.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So instead of sparking curiosity, their reaction might be defensiveness. The video mentions psychological defense mechanisms.
Exactly that. When our understanding feels threatened, even subtly, by profound thought, we often react defensively. You see it in everyday life, right? People might actively avoid deeper conversations.
Change the subject.
Totally.
Yes.
Or just disengage. It's like this instinct to go into self-protection mode,
Yeah.
rather than leaning in with curiosity. Because facing those deeper thoughts,
Yeah.
it can be uncomfortable. It can feel like a threat to their worldview.
It almost seems like in many social situations, confidence wins out over actual wisdom, even if the confidence is based on simpler ideas.
Oh, absolutely. That's a fascinating human tendency.
Yep.
We're often drawn to certainty.
Yeah.
And confidence, even if it's not deeply rooted, projects certainty.
And that's appealing.
Very appealing. Reassuring, even. People naturally tend to follow those who seem absolutely sure, even if the ideas themselves lack, well, complexity or nuance.
Right.
That's why sometimes you see charismatic people with straightforward solutions gain huge influence, maybe more than thoughtful individuals who are grappling with complexities and challenging popular beliefs.
You see that with leaders, public figures.
All through history, yeah. Often, the ones speaking with total conviction, regardless of the actual depth, are the ones who gather the biggest followings. Those who introduce doubt or complexity. They often face more resistance.
And that links to something really interesting from the video, this idea of a neurological basis for the fear. It mentioned feeling intellectually inferior can actually trigger the amygdala.
Yes. Modern neuroscience gives us a really compelling angle here.
Right.
Research does suggest that when people perceive themselves as sort of intellectually outmatched, it can indeed trigger activity in the amygdala,
The fear center.
the brain region involved in processing fear and threat. Exactly.
Yeah.
So encountering deep thinking isn't just an intellectual thing. It can actually tap into a very, very primal survival response.
Wow, that sounds intense.
Well, it likely goes way back, rooted in our evolutionary history where fitting in, being accepted by the group, was absolutely crucial for survival. Think about that little jolt of anxiety you might feel if you say something unpopular in a group.
Yeah.
That's like a tiny echo of this ancient fear response.
So it's the tribal brain kicking in.
Yeah.
We're wired to prioritize fitting in over maybe pursuing truth.
Precisely. For most of human history, survival depended heavily on group cohesion. Social harmony meant safety. Being kicked out could literally be a death sentence.
Right.
So our brains evolved to really prioritize social acceptance. Deep thinkers, often by just questioning norms or established beliefs, can inadvertently disrupt that tribal balance.
Making them seem like a threat.
Almost, yeah. Triggering a defensive response in others, as if they're a potential danger to the group's stability.
And the social context makes a big difference, right? The video mentions Stanford research showing this rejection is stronger in groups.
That's a really crucial point. The Stanford work highlights that this negative reaction tends to get amplified in group settings. Why? Because that's where social status suddenly becomes much more important, more salient.
Ah, okay.
In a one-on-one chat, the perceived threat is often lower. You might have a more open exchange. But in a group, if someone feels intellectually inadequate, their instinct to protect their standing within that group kicks in much harder.
Leading them to dismiss or maybe even criticize the deep thinker?
Potentially, yes, to kind of shore up their own position.
Okay, so it's not just the ideas, but how they play out in social dynamics. Now, the video also brought up some cognitive biases that play into this. Let's talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect first.
Ah, Dunning-Kruger. That's a
Hmm.
classic. And fascinating. It's basically the bias where people who are less competent in a specific area tend to overestimate their own competence.
While the experts often underestimate theirs.
Exactly. So, thinking about intellectual ability, someone with less knowledge might genuinely believe they're quite smart. And because of that, they might dismiss or look down on people who are truly knowledgeable.
Seeing them as, what, overly complicated, out of touch?
Something like that, yeah. You see it online all the time, right? People with very little expertise expressing really strong, simple opinions and just brushing off more nuanced expert views.
And then there's the status quo bias, our tendency to just stick with what we know.
Precisely. Our brains just seem hardwired to prefer the familiar, the predictable. We like existing ideas, existing situations, more than new, complex, or uncertain ones.
Even if the new ones are better.
Even then, deep thinking often produces insights that challenge the status quo, and that just creates this feeling of unease, resistance. Change can be scary, even good change.
And the backfire effect. That's when evidence against your beliefs just makes you dig your heels in even deeper.
That's the one. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? But when our deeply held beliefs get directly challenged, instead of logically evaluating the new info, we often just double down on our original view. We become more convinced.
So deep thinkers, who often challenge conventional wisdom,
Can unfortunately trigger this backfire effect pretty easily, making productive conversation even harder.
man, it feels like how we get information today, especially social media, might be making all this worse. The video touched on algorithms.
Oh, definitely. Social media algorithms, generally speaking, are designed to maximize engagement, right? And what gets engagement? Often it's content that sparks strong emotions, controversy, or is super simple and easy to digest.
Not necessarily thoughtful, nuanced discussion.
Not usually, no. Simple, attention-grabbing stuff, often with a big emotional hook, tends to spread way faster and wider than complex, deeply reasoned ideas.
Making it harder for those complex thoughts to even get heard.
Exactly. It can create an environment where it's tough for those ideas to gain traction, which can, further isolate people who think deeply and whose insights need more than a quick scroll to unpack.
This is painting a bit of a tough picture for people who like to think deeply. But the video also brought in Schopenhauer's perspective. What was his take on all this? He wasn't exactly an optimist, was he?
Huh. No, definitely not. Schopenhauer had a pretty stark view. He essentially suggested that wisdom isn't so much a gift as it is, well, a burden. Something that often leads people who truly understand the world into loneliness.
A burden. Wow. Why?
Unlike some philosophers who might see intelligence as a path to connection or success, Schopenhauer argued the opposite. He thought the more intelligent you are, the harder it is to genuinely connect with society, because the deeper you see.
The lonelier you become.
Pretty much. Because society, in his view, is often quite happy with superficiality, while true intelligence craves truth, even uncomfortable truth.
Why did he see it as such a burden, though? What was his reasoning?
Well, his whole philosophy revolves around this concept of the will. He saw it as this blind, irrational force driving basically all human behavior. Most people, he argued, are just driven by this will to survive, to seek pleasure, avoid pain.
Sure.
But highly intelligent individuals, according to Schopenhauer, develop something different. A powerful will to truth. A relentless desire to understand how things really are, no matter how unpleasant that reality might be.
So a clash of motivations. The masses seeking pleasure, the thinker seeking truth.
A fundamental clash, yeah. And that difference creates this huge chasm between them.
So the better someone understands human nature, the harder it is to connect, because they see through all the superficial stuff in everyday interactions.
That's a key part of it for Schopenhauer. He thought most social interactions were full of trivial stuff, social
Mhm.
games, polite lies, you name it.
Things deep thinkers might find unfulfilling.
Deeply unfulfilling, maybe even alienating. They value authenticity, truth. They want real connection, genuine talk. But society often prefers surface harmony, avoiding uncomfortable truths.
Which leads to boredom, isolation.
A profound sense of it, potentially, especially for those who see the world with that extra clarity.
And he also thought that deep thinkers might see common goals, common ambitions as kind of pointless, illusory.
Yeah, exactly. Things like chasing wealth, social status, even intense romantic pursuits. Schopenhauer saw a lot of that as driven by illusion.
Okay.
So, deep thinkers, with their clearer view of, say, the human condition, the fleeting nature of these things, might question how meaningful they really are.
Which makes them seem detached, disinterested in what drives everyone else.
It can definitely come across that way. It makes them seem out of sync with what society values, further adding to that feeling of being misunderstood.
So for Schopenhauer, wisdom really is this double-edged sword. It gives you clearer sight,
But it also isolates you.
isolates you from those who are maybe happier living in illusion.
That's his view, yes. He compared wisdom to this capacity that grants deep insight, but also deep isolation from those content with. Well, what he saw as self-imposed illusions. The sharper you see the flaws, the harder it is to feel connected.
That sounds incredibly bleak. Did he offer any way out? Any advice for deep thinkers stuck in this isolation? The video mentioned some advice.
He did, thankfully. It wasn't just doom and gloom. He actually advocated for embracing solitude, not seeing it as a punishment, but as a privilege, really, an opportunity
An opportunity for what?
to pursue knowledge, creativity, art, things you can do without the constant distraction of superficial social stuff. He also strongly recommended seeking out like-minded people.
Finding your tribe, so to speak.
That's essentially, yes, whether it's through reading their work, finding intellectual communities, whatever, finding others who operate on a similar wavelength.
And anything else.
And crucially, he advised deep thinkers to be smart about when and how they share their deeper insights. Observe society, understand how it works, and then choose your moments and your words carefully. Don't just blurt everything out all the time.
That makes sense. Use wisdom wisely, even in how you share it.
Exactly.
You know, Schopenhauer's ideas seem to really echo those historical examples the video brought up. Socrates, Galileo, Tesla, these brilliant people who face so much resistance.
Absolutely. They're like textbook examples of this pattern, aren't they?
Yes.
Society pushing back hard against deep thinkers and their transformative ideas,
Right, Socrates questioning everything.
challenging the foundations of Athens. And they condemned him for corrupting the youth, basically, for making people think for themselves.
And Galileo.
His heliocentric view. It directly contradicted the church's established doctrine. It threatened their authority, the whole understanding of the cosmos back then. Huge resistance.
Nietzsche, too. His ideas were pretty radical.
Very radical. Questioning traditional morality, society's values. Mostly misunderstood and rejected while he was alive.
And Tesla, with his ideas about energy.
Groundbreaking ideas, especially free energy concepts. But they ran up against powerful industrial interests who liked things just the way they were, thank you very much. So, suppression, resistance.
It seems like in every case, their deep thinking uncovered truths that just shook the status quo too much.
And that shaking leads to discomfort, fear, opposition. It's that mirror effect, maybe, on a massive societal scale.
And it's not just ancient history or figures from centuries ago, right? The video mentioned Alan Turing, Hypatia.
That's right. More recent tragic examples. Turing, crucial for WWII code breaking, foundational for computing, persecuted horribly for his personal life.
And Hypatia.
A brilliant female philosopher, mathematician in Alexandria, brutally murdered by religious fanatics. Shows the dangers, historically, for anyone challenging the dominant intellectual or religious powers, especially women challenging male dominance in knowledge.
So these examples, across different times, different places, they really highlight this ongoing tension, don't they, between deep thinking and societal norms.
It really seems like a recurring pattern throughout history. Society often resists, even fears, the change that wisdom might bring, even if that change turns out to be progress down the line.
So for you listening right now, the learner, if you identify with this, if you see yourself as someone who thinks deeply, what's the takeaway? What practical advice can we offer for navigating today's world?
Well, maybe the most valuable thing is to be discerning, be selective, about when you share your deepest thoughts and with whom. It's not about hiding, but choosing your audience and your moment.
Find people who get it.
Yes, seek out those genuine connections. Find individuals who actually appreciate and can engage with your way of thinking. That's invaluable.
And maybe how you communicate matters too.
Definitely. Learn to communicate complex ideas in ways that are maybe more accessible, but without dumbing them down or losing the core meaning. That's a skill in itself.
And like Schopenhauer said, observe the world, choose your moments wisely.
Understand the dynamics, yeah.
So wrapping this up, It seems the core idea isn't that society fears intelligence itself, like pure brain power.
Probably not, no.
It's more about the truths that deep thinking can uncover and the change, the disruption those truths might bring.
Exactly. Deep thinkers often face resistance not because they're objectively wrong, but because their perspectives challenge comfortable illusions, shake up established orders, maybe arrive a bit too early. They're ahead of their time sometimes.
So if you listening have ever felt that isolation, that feeling of being misunderstood because you think deeply,
Please know you're absolutely not alone in that. History is full of brilliant people who walk that same path. Your perspective is valuable, truly valuable, even if it's not always immediately welcomed by everyone you meet.
and it's a paradox, isn't it? While society might not always be set up to easily embrace deep thinkers,
It's so often that very deep thinking that ends up driving progress, innovation, positive change in the long run.
so maybe the final thought for you is to keep cultivating that intellectual curiosity, keep thinking deeply, but also think thoughtfully about how you navigate this dynamic in your own life.
Yeah, keep exploring these ideas. Reflect on your own experiences. Maybe share them. It's a complex relationship, deep thinking, and society. And the conversation is definitely ongoing.